All right, how to correctly set up your own lab. Let's talk about building your own lab, your own malware analysis lab. So these are the things that I recommend when you're building your own lab. You need a few different operating systems because malware does behave differently on different operating systems. This is kind of my recommendation on what you should do. So I believe that you should have a Windows 7 64-bit machine because everyone uses Windows 7. And everyone uses 64-bit machines. Now granted, I know a lot of people are starting to use Windows 10. Windows 10 does have some extra security features such as address randomization and some other features that make it a little difficult to analyze malware. Not impossible. Obviously, a lot of people do analyze malware in Windows 10, and there's a lot of very successful malware attacks against Windows 10. But Windows 10 does have some security features. So when you're first starting off building your lab, I would recommend trying to stick with Windows 7 if possible. I would also look at having Internet Explorer 11, just because anything older than Internet Explorer 11 is not really usable. You get too many errors and it has too many bugs. And really anything after Internet Explorer 11 has, is starting to have a lot more security patches. Nothing wrong with that. Once again, it just takes a little more work to examine malware. You're going to get to the same spot, so you might as well just make it easier for yourself to examine in one step than rather run 3 or 4 steps before you can examine it. Now, I know sometimes Windows operating systems are kind of difficult to get, so I do want you to point you to this site called Modern IE. If you go to modernie.com, you can actually go ahead and download the latest copy of, well, not the latest copy, like different copies of Windows 7 operating systems, Windows 10 operating systems, with Internet Explorer and other operating systems as well. So a great place to go for development and for test systems. It was really meant for developers to have test Windows systems, but you can go there as well just to test your malware lab or to build something in your malware lab. I believe the licenses on Modern IE are all 90 days. It is a site from Microsoft, so you're downloading directly from Microsoft. So other things you can do in your lab, as I said, is you may want to expand and get other operating systems out there. I do like Windows XP as an operating system. It's not really used anymore, but just from analyzing malware, I still think it's a great option. And I think it's a great option because malware runs so easily on Windows XP. It's just is very easy to analyze. When you're first starting off analyzing malware, it's not a bad idea. In the real world, it's not really applicable anymore. No, not really anyone uses Windows XP in the real world, but I personally like it just to analyze malware. Windows 10, as I said, more and more people are using Windows 10. Windows 10 has a lot of security features out there. Analyzing malware is a little more difficult, but eventually you're going to need to do it anyways. So if you're building a lab with multiple operating systems, you might as well put Windows 10 on there. I would still recommend starting off your primary box as using Windows 7 or even Windows XP as your primary box, and then graduating up to Windows 7 and then maybe Windows 10. Okay, the other thing you may want to consider is the Remnux analysis system. Remnux is a open source freeware tool created by Lenny Zelster. Lenny is actually well known in the cybersecurity community as a master of many things. He's extremely well known and well respected, but one of the things he's known for is his passion and his dedication to reverse malware engineering. He's actually he's taught many people for different classes. He's written blogs. He's really well known out there. He's created this toolkit. It's based on Linux called a Remnux analysis system. As I said, it's open source. It has a lot of open source tools that are built right into it that are ideal for analyzing malware. Everyone from people that are starting off analyzing malware to experts that are already in reverse engineering will use that system. So I definitely like that system, and it has a lot of tools and features out there. And there's a lot of enhanced tutorials you can find on the internet. There's a lot of enhanced labs you can find on the internet that go for Remnux and actually go for the process of analyzing malware. All right, let's talk about actually setting up your system. So virtual machines are advantageous when setting up a lab, any lab. I do like virtual machines. I take advantage of them. One of the things with virtual machines is you can do snapshots. What snapshots are, it lets you basically revert back to a state of the virtual machine. So I start off with a clean state of the virtual machine, and then I run my malware. If the malware damages the machine, that's fine. I revert back to the snapshot, and I'm back at the clean state of the virtual machine. So snapshots, I like to take them in running state. The reason I like to take them in running state, this is just a little tip, a little trick of the trade, let's say. If you take a snapshot in running state, when you restore the machine, it's back in running state. So a lot of people turn off their virtual machines, take a snapshot. When you restore a virtual machine and when it's turned off, your machine's turned off. Nice thing about taking a snapshot in running state is the machine's already turned on, ready to go. Saves a couple of minutes of my time, but that's okay. I love saving a couple of minutes. When I tell people really before you run your snapshot, more accurately, before you run your snapshot, run all your tools. The reason you want to run all your tools is I hate it like when you run a tool for the first time and it gives you that pop-up message like, please accept something, please accept an agreement, or click yes to continue. If you take a snapshot before you run all your tools, when you restore your snapshot, you're going to have to get that to that point again. If you run all your tools, take a snapshot, then you're at the point where your tools are already running. You've already accepted all the licensing and all the agreements and all the EULA, every place you need to check yes. So just run all your tools, open up all your programs, make your system is ready to go before you run a snapshot. So when you restore, you're back at that point. One of the things to remember is when you're setting up your virtual machine, a lot of people share folders between their host machine and virtual machine. When you're running malware, this can be very dangerous. First of all, I recommend no sharing and no connectivity between your virtual machine and your host machine. But if you do have to share information and you do have to share folders, first of all, you should ask yourself, why do I really need to save this? Is there a better way to do this? Can I use a USB stick? Is there other ways of sharing information? But I know it's convenient, but convenience is not always appropriate when you're setting up a malware lab, because this malware can actually damage your systems. But if you do have to set up a shared folder, try using only a read-only folder, so that way if malware is attacking your system, it's not actually rewriting your host system or encrypting it or running ransomware against your host system. It's entirely possible. If you don't set up correctly, you could infect your real system as well. And that's also maybe a good idea when you are setting up a machine for malware analysis, that you don't use your real machine, your work production machine, that you're setting up a lab machine as well. So many malware, by the way, they understand that a lot of researchers will analyze them, and they analyze them in virtual machines. So malware authors don't want their malware to be analyzed. They're like, I don't want researchers looking at my malware. So they do techniques to try and hide their malware from not working in virtual machines. They do things like look at the virtual machines, the network address card and MAC address, and they say, you know what, this MAC address belongs to VMware. I'm not going to run on this virtual machine. I'm just not going to work because I don't want people, I don't want someone to analyze me. There is some malware that has in the past tried to break out of a virtual machine and get to the real machine and try and infect your system. So it detects that it's in a virtual machine and tries to break out. Hasn't really been successful recently. There's nothing modern that does that, but there is always that possibility that someone could come up with a 0-day or something of that nature to make that work. All right, so these are all the ways that all the things that you may want to think about in setting up a virtual machine. But let's go ahead and move forward on other things that we can do. As I said, malware does look to see if it's on a virtual machine. So one of the things you want to do is you want to kind of fool the malware into thinking that it's not on a machine that's just used for analysis. You want to make your VM, your virtual machine, look as real as possible, like a real production machine. How do you do that? Well, most virtual machines, people set up a very minimum amount of RAM. Like I've seen virtual machines with 1 gig of RAM and 1 CPU core. There's no real machine that uses 1 gig of RAM and CPU core. This is not 1990 anymore, guys. Even the most cheapest machines, even the most entry-level machines, actually run more than 1 gig of RAM and 1 CPU core. So I say if you want your malware to behave correctly, make sure you have more than 1 gig of RAM and more than 1 CPU. A lot of malware will check for this minimum because that's the minimum, that's the default how you build these machines. If you have the default, it just won't run. It'll be like, you know what, I definitely know I'm on a virtual machine because no real machine just has 1 gig of RAM. I always say like install real programs. Like if you really want your VM to work right and to be able to analyze malware, like install the programs you would normally use in a real everyday basis. You know, Adobe Acrobat Reader, Google Chrome, Firefox, Notepad, Edit++, whatever you're using, go ahead and install those programs and actually like use them. Use them for a couple of days or use them, for a week. Or like make that virtual machine as real as possible. You also want to make sure like you move the mouse and keyboard. Some malware actually waits for a little bit and says like, you know what, I don't see the mouse and keyboard moving at all, so I'm not going to run. No one's on this machine, or maybe a fake machine, or maybe just a non-usable machine. There are programs that help you analyze the malware that actually do move the mouse and keyboard for you, so they automate that for you. But it's always a cat and mouse game, because malware looks for those automated programs, and those automated programs then try and use new techniques that malware doesn't know about. As I said, not only do you want to open up applications before you're running malware, but you also want to open up different files. If malware is on a system and nothing has ever been run on that system, no files have been opened up, no Word documents been opened up, the malware is going to think like, hey, this is not always the case, but like very, very sophisticated malware authors will put some logic into their malware saying like, this is obviously a test system, this is not being used in real life, so I'm not even going to run the malware because I don't want to give an opportunity for anyone to examine that malware. So as I said, if you run it as a real machine before you turn it into a detection malware system, then it's much better for you. I would also rename some common tools that you have on your virtual machine, debuggers, for example, and some other common tools. Malware may look for common malware tools, and if it finds those tools, it says, hey, you're running this program, and I know this program is used primarily to analyze malware, so since it's on your machine, I'm not going to run, because now it knows that you're a malware analysis system. So I would say go ahead and rename some of the tools. Now, speaking of tools, I just have a list that I put on screen on some of my tools that I got started with when analyzing malware. This is not an all-encompassing list, of course, and this is what I would call like the beginner's toolkit. So these are some of my favorite tools. We are going to talk about them throughout this course a little bit. We're going to examine some of these tools and maybe even see some demos throughout the course. But these are some tools that you should know about and actually look at, and they're really popular. So hopefully this helps in your career in getting started in malware analysis and helps you get started in building your own malware analysis lab. All right, guys, I really appreciate it, and I will talk to you soon.